The collapse of the Weimar Republic remains one of the most extensively studied episodes in modern political history. Established in the aftermath of the World War I, the Republic represented Germany's first sustained attempt at parliamentary democracy. Yet within just 14 years, it had disintegrated, giving way to the dictatorship of Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party. Understanding why the Weimar Republic failed requires more than identifying a single cause. Historians have consistently emphasized that its collapse was the result of multiple interacting crises: political, economic, social, and psychological. As Heinrich August Winkler argues, Weimar was a democracy without democrats, lacking the deep-rooted support necessary to withstand prolonged instability. Similarly, Detlev Peukert characterized it as a system overwhelmed by the crisis of classical modernity, in which rapid social and economic changes placed unprecedented strain on political institutions. This essay argues that the failure of the Weimar Republic can be understood through three interconnected factors. First, its origins in defeat and revolution undermined its legitimacy from the outset. Second, its structural weaknesses and political fragmentation prevented effective governance. Third, economic crises, particularly hyperinflation and the Great Depression, eroded public confidence, creating conditions in which extremist movements could thrive. These dynamics ultimately facilitated the rise of Hitler, whose success depended not only on his own political strategy, but on the failures of the system. The Weimar Republic emerged in late 1918 under conditions that were fundamentally unfavorable to democratic stability. Unlike many democracies that developed gradually, Weimar was created suddenly. In the context of military defeat and political upheaval, the abdication of the Kaiser and the collapse of imperial authority left a power vacuum that was filled not by consensus but by necessity. This origin shaped perceptions of the Republic from the beginning. The signing of the Treaty of Versailles further compounded the problem. The treaty imposed territorial losses, military restrictions, and reparations. But its symbolic impact was even more significant. As Richard J. Evans notes, it was widely perceived as a national humiliation, and the new democratic government became associated with its acceptance. This association proved politically damaging. Many Germans viewed the Republic not as a legitimate expression of national will, but as a regime imposed under duress. The so-called stab-in-the-back myth reinforced this perception, suggesting that Germany had not been defeated militarily, but betrayed by internal enemies. Although historically inaccurate, the myth gained widespread acceptance and undermined trust in democratic leadership. The result was a legitimacy crisis. The Republic was expected to govern effectively, yet it lacked the broad-based support necessary to do so. As Peukert observed, it was burdened from birth, forced to operate where significant segments of society were either indifferent or hostile to its existence. The Weimar Constitution was, in many respects, a modern and progressive document. It established universal suffrage and a range of civil liberties. However, it also contained structural weaknesses that contributed to political instability. One of the most significant was the system of proportional representation, which resulted in a highly fragmented party landscape. No single party could achieve a majority, making coalition governments necessary. While not inherently unstable, in Weimar it proved difficult to sustain. Governments were often short-lived, and policy-making became increasingly complex. This instability was compounded by Article 48 of the Constitution. Article 48 allowed the President to rule by decree in times of emergency. It became a mechanism through which democratic processes were bypassed. As Evans argues, the Constitution contained within it the means of its own destruction, enabling the gradual erosion of parliamentary governance. Political fragmentation also reflected deeper divisions within German society. Parties were often aligned with specific social groups, ideologies, or regional interests. The absence of a strong centrist consensus made it difficult to address crises effectively, further weakening confidence in the system. The early years were marked by significant political violence. Uprisings from both the left and the right demonstrated the fragility of the state. Paramilitary groups operated openly, and political assassinations were not uncommon. This environment had a profound impact on political culture. Violence became normalized. As Winkler notes, politics was conducted as much in the streets as in Parliament, blurring democratic participation and coercion. The persistence of violence undermined the authority of the state and contributed to a sense of instability. Citizens could not rely on the government. Over time, the normalization of violence made radical solutions appear more acceptable, paving the way for extremist movements. Economic instability played a central role. The hyperinflation crisis of 1923 was particularly significant for its long-term psychological effects. During this period, the value of the German currency collapsed, wiping out savings and destabilizing the middle class. As Adam Tooze explains, the crisis destroyed the financial foundations of social stability, undermining confidence in the economic system. Although the economy stabilized in the mid-1920s, this stability was fragile. It depended heavily on foreign loans, particularly from the United States. The onset of the Great Depression exposed this vulnerability. The withdrawal of loans and the collapse of trade led to mass unemployment. By the early 1930s, millions of Germans were out of work, and confidence in the government had deteriorated significantly. As Ian Kershaw argues, the Depression was a turning point, creating conditions in which extremist parties could gain support. Economic insecurity made voters more receptive to radical solutions, particularly those that promised stability and national revival. Beyond political and economic dimensions, the crisis was also psychological. Prolonged instability created a climate of uncertainty. Puckett notes that periods of crisis generate a search for order. In Weimar, this manifested in a desire for strong leadership. Democratic politics, with its compromises and complexities, appeared increasingly ineffective in addressing urgent problems. As uncertainty increased, the appeal of alternatives offering simple and decisive Solutionsgrößtranger, marking the end of the Republic's democratic experiment. The early failure of the Weimar Republic cannot be attributed to a single cause. Instead, it emerged from the interaction of multiple factors. These factors included a crisis of legitimacy rooted in defeat and revolution, and structural weaknesses that hindered effective governance. Economic instability further eroded public confidence. While these conditions did not inevitably lead to collapse, they made the system highly vulnerable. This vulnerability played a crucial role in enabling the rise of Hitler and the transformation of Germany's political landscape. By the late 1920s, the Weimar Republic entered what appeared to be a period of stability. Yet, this stability masked underlying vulnerabilities. The economic recovery depended heavily on international loans. When these deteriorated after the Great Depression, the foundations of the Republic were exposed. Unemployment rose sharply, reaching millions by the early 1930s. Businesses collapsed. Savings were lost, and social insecurity became widespread. As Ian Kershaw argued, the Depression created conditions in which political extremism could flourish, transforming dissatisfaction into active political realignment. Crucially, the crisis undermined confidence in moderate parties. Associated with the existing system, they appeared increasingly unable to provide solutions. In contrast, extremist parties unburdened by responsibility could present themselves as agents of decisive change. The Nazi Party had existed since the early 1920s, but its support remained limited until the 1929 economic crisis reshaped voter behavior. In the 1930 Reichstag elections, the Nazis achieved a significant breakthrough. By July 1932, they had become the largest party in parliament. Richard J. Evans notes the Nazis exploited economic distress and political disillusionment, presenting themselves as a viable alternative to a failing system. The party's appeal was broad, attracting the middle-class rural populations and the unemployed by promising economic recovery and national pride. The role of Adolf Hitler was central. His leadership combined organizational skill with an acute understanding of political communication. Unlike many traditional politicians, Hitler focused on emotional appeal. His speeches emphasized national renewal and unity, resonating with frustrated audiences. Kershaw highlights Hitler's ability to project authority and certainty in a time of crisis, contrasting with the perceived indecision of democratic politicians. The Nazis tailored their rhetoric to address specific concerns, whether economic insecurity, fear of social change, or resentment of the Versailles settlement. As electoral support for extremists increased, parliamentary democracy deteriorated. The Reichstag became polarized, and cooperation between groups became more difficult. The result was political deadlock. Governments struggled to form stable coalitions, leading to the frequent use of presidential decrees under Article 48. Evans argues that this shift represented the erosion of democracy, as government, by decree, normalized authoritarian methods and weakened the Reichstag. President Paul von Hindenburg played a significant role. As a military leader with a conservative outlook, he was not a committed supporter of the Republic. Hindenburg relied on a series of chancellors who governed without parliamentary majorities, further eroding public confidence in the system. By 1932, it was clear the Nazi Party had popular support. But Hitler's appointment as Chancellor was not inevitable. The decision in January 1933 resulted from maneuvering among conservative elites who believed they could control him. This was a fatal miscalculation. They underestimated Hitler's skill and ambition. Ancien power quickly consolidate authority, exploiting the very weaknesses that allowed his appointment. Following his appointment, a combination of legal measures, political pressure, and coercion was used to eliminate opposition. The Reichstag fire in February 1933 provided a pretext for the suspension of civil liberties. The Enabling Act of March 1933 granted the government power to legislate without parliament, effectively ending the Weimar Republic. Evans describes this as a legal revolution where state structures were used to transform its nature, building on earlier use of emergency powers. The collapse was the result of the interaction between structural weaknesses and the actions of key individuals and groups. The Republic might have survived under different conditions, but the convergence of crises in the early 1930s made survival increasingly difficult. The events of 1933 marked the beginning of a new and profoundly different political order. Understanding this transition is essential to understanding both the failure of Weimar and the broader dynamics of political instability.